What up, everybody? This is Chris Roscoe with Operation Moksha. This is my co-host, Bodhi. Today we're talking about an integrative look at the law of attraction. And I haven't made one of these videos in a long time, but I'm doing this because somebody wrote in about this question, and it's kind of complicated, and I haven't covered it in a while. And I also haven't been able to go deep on anything in videos because I've been busy running courses and stuff, so I want to kind of get back into it. So an integrative look at the law of attraction. What is the point of talking about this? For me, the point of talking about this is getting this very, very powerful and actually practical tool into as many hands as possible, specifically from an integrative perspective, because I want to remove as much magical thinking from this practice as humanly possible, because it's really, really useful, even if you just look at it from a psychological perspective. But I find that once you enter into like dogma and magical thinking, you lose a lot of people that could be able to use this if you didn't put that stuff in there. And I think it's important to be able to make these really important ideas accessible to as many people as humanly possible, and also make it as explainable as humanly possible, because the more you understand about the processes and practices that you're using, the better you can use them. And so I'm going to talk about it today from a psychological perspective, and more importantly, an integrative perspective. But I'm also going to outline the point at which I step into some kind of magical thinking and show the differences between the two approaches and how you can still get a lot without ever crossing that boundary. So if you're one of those type of people that really dislikes magical thinking in any way, I encourage you to still watch all the way through, because you're going to see how to get value out of it without needing any of that, just your mind. So I think at this point, it's important to define what the law of attraction is. And basically, it's this idea that as you think things, they will come into being. That whatever your most dominant thought, or to be more specific, your most dominant energy frequency is the thing that literally creates your reality for you. Now, it's easy to look at this from a magical perspective and just think that like, oh, it's all energy and harmonics and frequencies and stuff. And so if I put out a certain frequency, the universe will create itself in a certain way to match that from a quantum level and blah, 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 blah. But that's highly theoretical. Even like the closest inklings we have to pointing to that are still really, really far away from being able to prove that on any level whatsoever. And a lot of the like experiments that people use to quote this power have been falsified. So I want to do away with a lot of that shit. And the way I'm going to start talking about that in the beginning is talking about probabilities. So your mind is constantly prescribing probabilities to things, right? Like you perceive the world based on what you think is most probable. And you actually create the world, your perception of the world, based on an internal feedback loop within your mind. You don't necessarily create your perception of the world based on what you see around you. You create your perception of the world based off of internal feedback loop based on what you've seen up until this point, and what you think you've seen up until this point. So the reason that I'm saying this is because your perception of reality is really, it has much more to do with what's going on in here than it does out there. And the reason that's important to talk about in relationship to the law of attraction is because you will engage with the world based on what you consider to be the highest level of probability of any certain circumstance. Where if you see a high level of probability that there's opportunity everywhere in your world, you will see opportunity in places where other people won't see it. And actually, you might see it in places where it doesn't really exist, which can be really helpful in helping you create opportunities for yourself and create circumstances for yourself that will work in your favor, even if they might not actually exist. You can create them kind of out of nothing because you've trained your mind to see opportunity more often than it actually might exist. And the opposite is also true. Or if you have this idea that nothing ever works out for me and I never get what I want, then you'll see failure and you'll see lack of opportunity where there's actually opportunities all over the place. You won't see them because they don't register to you as the highest probability of what you're likely to run into. And a big portion of why we do this is so that we can live in a world that we understand, feel safe in, know the rules for, and basically just feel comfortable in. Because one of the biggest human fears is the unknown. So if we can live in a world that we understand, even if it's shitty, it's still better than living in a world that's outside of probabilities that we can deal with and know how to engage in our world. We would rather be safe and small and have a less fulfilling life than expand into the unknown and not really know what the fuck is going on. So it's important to understand that this is actually what's happening. You're prescribing probabilities so that you can feel safe. And so in order to expand beyond that, you're going to need to face the unknown, which is going to be a pretty uncomfortable thing to do. But the main reason that I'm saying this is because you can shift your perception of the world and the way that you engage with it just depending on how you choose to perceive it. And there's this thing called neuroplasticity, which says that we can actually reprogram our minds to function in basically any way we choose. But that's when we're going to have to get into the shadow stuff in a little bit, because the shadow is the biggest thing left out of this law of attraction sort of stuff. So up until this point, the case that I'm trying to make is that even without this magical thinking sort of stuff, you will see possibilities where other people won't, or maybe you wouldn't have seen them before. You will engage with the world in a different way depending on how you see it, because you're constantly prescribing probabilities. And if you change the highest level of probabilities to be things that you'd like to see, you will just see it more and you'll engage with the world. And that's enough, honestly, to be able to change the way that you engage with the world and the way that you perceive the world is enough to make it look like magic. Now, this is the bounds of what I can explain. This is as far as I can go with what I can explain. And it's fucking plenty. But there is this thing that I've noticed that I don't quite know how to explain. And it seems as though the world around me does respond to shifts in my energy. I don't know how to explain it, but one of the things that happens to me frequently is if I'm starting to get overwhelmed or if I'm feeling kind of shitty and unmotivated, I will have clients reschedule their calls. And I won't have anything to do with it. It'll just end up happening that way because something in my energy, or I will notice that I won't get a lot of requests for new clients if I'm not really feeling up to it. But as soon as I shift into a space of being like, cool, I'm ready to take on more people and I'm ready to truly be of support, then suddenly I get a lot of requests. I don't know how to explain these things. I really fucking don't. But they do happen. And I wanted to say this because if you are more of a spiritual kind of person who's willing to live out at least a little bit outside of the bounds of what's easily explainable, there's a lot available to you. I don't understand how this works, but there does seem to be rules to it. Specifically in that I noticed that life supports me in becoming more of who I want to be. The magic and the guidance and the synchronicity and all these sorts of things, they work in favor of me becoming who I really am. It doesn't really necessarily seem to work so much when it comes to ego stuff. I don't know, actually. Now that I think about it, I don't fucking know, since I don't generally try to manifest or whatever anything that's outside of what's authentically right to me. So, but what I notice is that there's something that seems to organize the world around me in a way to support me in becoming who I most truly am inside. And I don't know how to explain that, but that does seem to happen. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this thing that they talk about in the law of attraction, which is that it's whatever the most dominant frequency that you put out is the thing that you will attract. Where if like you're putting out 80% fear and 20% positivity, you're going to get more fear-based shit in your reality. Whereas if you're putting 80% positivity and only 20% fear, you're going to get more of the positive stuff. It's this like whatever you put out, you get back type of idea. Now, the problem with this is that they don't take into consideration the shadow, right? A lot of times, like I read The Secret when I was like 19, which was like 13 years ago or something like that. Yeah, 13 years ago. No, 14. And they just say to think positive thoughts and to have like the positive and the good thoughts and the things that you really want, to have that be the most dominant thought in your mind, and specifically have it be the most dominant energy in your being that you're putting out. But they don't address the shadow whatsoever. So a trap that I fell into that actually had really negative impacts on me was trying to overpower all of my negative thoughts and overpower all of my doubts and overpower all of my anything that was getting in the way of what I wanted. I just had to forcefully overpower it because there was nothing in this framework to talk about the fact that I was going to have parts of my personality that oppose the positivity. There's no framework for that when you just learn about law of attraction. There's no framework for that when it comes to a lot of new age stuff in general. And so this is one of the traps that I fell into, is that I was repressing my more negative sides so that I could be more positive and get the positive results. But it was actually making the negative stuff stronger, because what happens is when you repress any part of yourself, it has to build in strength and momentum and ferocity even in order to get your attention so that you can learn the lesson that this part of yourself is trying to get you to learn in the fucking first place. Because the idea isn't that you just live on the positive thoughts and repress all the bad. It's like both are parts of you. And if you have a part of you that is saying, hey, maybe don't go for that goal, or maybe don't like manifest or whatever this thing, it might have a good reason for telling you that. And that's worth fucking looking at. Not only is there hidden wisdom in there that you're going to miss if you just repress it, but you're also repressing a really lost, hurt, and scared part of yourself that's just trying to get your attention. And so you will force it to speak up louder and more forcefully in order to get your attention so that you can learn the lesson later on. So what ends up happening is you put more and more energy into fighting this thing, and it gets stronger and potentially becomes the actual most dominant energy. And then you divert more energy that you should have been using on being positive and integrating this thing into the conflict, and your life gets consumed by the conflict rather than you actually going in the direction that you wanted to go. You end up rerouting a lot of your energy to fighting yourself and being in conflict with yourself rather than just creating in the direction that you wanted to create. So that's a big fucking trap. So the thing to look about, to know about this, is that your shadow has to be addressed if you're going to be doing this stuff. Otherwise, you don't even know what percentages you're dealing with. So if you want to have the more positive energies being the highest percentages of the things being put out, then you have to take a look at how much your shadow is actually active. And it's like, if I'm saying I want to be... like for me, I want to be a successful coach, right? Does most of me believe that? Or does most of me believe I can't have that? I should probably pay attention to what most of me believes and try to balance those scales out a little bit. Now you might be asking, how the fuck do you balance those scales? And it's all about allocation of attention and awareness, right? Like I try to put most of my attention on where I'm going, but I also have to keep one eye on my shadow. Because if you don't, you're going to be moving, you're going to be sailing in this direction while another part of you takes the boat apart without you looking at it. So you need to be aware of the shadow, but you want to keep most of your attention on where you're going. But keep just enough attention on the shadow to make sure that you're aware if it starts causing problems for you or if it's telling you things that you really need to be aware of. And so there's this thing where I try to put at least 51% of my attention on where I'm going. And this works even when I'm processing my shadow. Like if I'm noticing that there's like negative energy, so to speak, that goes against what I'm trying to create, then I keep an eye on where I'm going while I process that. I remember what processing this part of me is in service of. It's like, okay, I want to go here, but this part of my mind is telling me not to go there. Let me take a look at that. Let me understand why it's telling me not to go there, while remembering where I wanted to go in the first place. Because the point of looking at this and integrating this is to help me become more authentic, is to look at this part of myself that has information for me and integrate that information and that wisdom into my life, also integrating this part of my personality into my life so that I can use its energy to drive me in the direction that I truly most authentically want to go. So with that in mind, you have to remember where it is you're wanting to go when you look at these things. Otherwise, you can get lost, which is why the very first thing I teach my clients is to create a vision that fucking matters to you, because that is the context in which you integrate these things. So if you're keeping your attention on where you want to go and integrating the thoughts and different parts of your personality that come up in opposition to that, then you're going to keep the momentum going in the direction that you want to go and steer away from the trap of putting too much energy in your shadow and steering downward. Because you can do that. You can get stuck on your shadow. You can get lost in there. You can put like 51% of your energy there and end up steering you in a negative direction. So it is important to keep your energy and your attention on where you want to go. And this is important regardless of whether or not you want to look at it from the spiritual lens. If you just want to look at it from the psychological lens, you're assigning probabilities depending on which one you look at more. If you look at your shadow more, you're assigning more probabilities that your life is going to reflect and resemble your shadow. But if you keep your eye on your vision and on your goals and your authentic sense of self And that's where your attention's going. That's what you're going to build momentum towards. And all the other work is going to be in service of that. So that's really, really important to know. Momentum, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the other thing is that you want to make sure that you face your shadow regularly. This is a part of my nightly routine, and you can ask anybody who I'm friends with that I live close by. I am very protective over my nightly routine. I am very protective of it. I don't care what the fuck is going on. I go home and I take care of my nightly routine so that I can keep my momentum going in the direction that I want to go. And the reason that I'm saying this is because part of my nightly routine is to think about consistently where I want to go and who I want to be while I'm going there, right? Feeding that positive momentum and doing the visualization work, which allows me to, because in Law of Attraction, in the spiritual version, visualization, it's like you train reality to create things based on how you visualize them, which is kind of cool in a magical sort of way. But from a psychological perspective, a lot of times the brain doesn't know the difference between thoughts and reality, which is why I used to take Kung Fu. And one thing that my Kung Fu teacher told me, he's like, even if you're too tired or whatever to do your repetitions, do them in your mind, and your mind will think that you've done it. You can even build muscle mass that way. So the reason visualization is important is from a spiritual perspective, because you tell the universe what to create, I think is the idea. It's been a long time. I've forgotten it, honestly. But from a psychological perspective, it's important to do that because you're training your mind that this is the new reality. The more you embody it, you're training your nervous system to believe that this is the new reality. And so that's what you're quite literally training yourself to do. So every single night, I focus on where I'm going, and I try and get into like what it would be like to be that way and to live that way and to see the world that way and to engage the world as if it were that way and all these different things, while also taking stock of the parts of my personality that oppose it, seeing if I can learn from them, seeing if I can integrate them and use them in service to going where I want to go. So that's all that stuff. So basically, in order to wrap all this up, from a psychological perspective, you will engage the world based on the way that you see it. You will create opportunity where there might not be any if you choose to, but you will also see lack where there might not be any if you choose to. And the way that you see the world changes the way that you engage the world, and the way that you engage the world with your behaviors and your attitudes and all these sorts of things have a dramatic impact on the way that the world actually is to you. So even if you just looked at this from a psychological perspective, you're doing pretty fucking good. Now, on the magical perspective, there is this unknown, unseen force that seems to organize things in a way that guides you and provides you with the proper steps and lessons and all kinds of things to get you where you want to go. I don't know how the fuck to explain that, but it really is beautiful. And I've bet my life and my well-being on it multiple times. And it's paid off for me every single time. So I hope this is looking like at least 18-minute video. So I hope this is valuable for you. People generally say to not talk this long, but this is a lot of information that I think it was important to give a detailed, complex, and nuanced discussion of this from both perspectives so that whoever the fuck you are, you can use this and you can actually see how practical it is. So I hope this was beneficial. If you have any questions or concerns about anything, you can always reach out to me. This topic was given to me by somebody who reached out for support but couldn't afford coaching. And so one of the things that I do for those who can't afford coaching is I say, well, let me know what I can make a video on, or let me know what I can write a piece of content on. Because if you can't afford coaching, I still want to make sure that you can get help. Because I've been homeless, I've been dead broke, I've been really mentally ill, I've been a combination of all of those things in the past. And I know how hard it is to be getting by with no money, but still need the help, but you can't afford the help. And it's like a catch-22 thing of like, I need to pay for help so I can get better, but I can't pay for help because I'm not better yet. And it's like, it's just a big fucking cycle. So I want to cut through that by at least providing and creating free content that I know those of you who can't afford coaching can actually use. So let me know. I love you. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. And I will see you next time. Peace. If I can find the thing. Okay, bye.